Marie Curie was the most celebrated scientist of her time, a two-time Nobel Prize winner who revolutionized our understanding of the universe. She discovered radium, saved millions of lives, and opened doors for women in science that had been locked for centuries. She also died a slow, agonizing death from the very elements she discovered. Her last words, whispered as she stirred her tea with a glass laboratory rod, were haunting. Was it done with radium or with mesothorium? Even in death, Marie Curie couldn't escape the radioactive legacy of her discoveries. Her body was so contaminated that she had to be buried in a lead-lined coffin, and her laboratory notebooks are still deadly to touch more than a century later. Hi everyone, Alex Reed here. If you think Chernobyl was the worst radiation disaster in history, you haven't heard Marie Curie's story. This is the tale of a woman who literally carried death in her pockets for decades, all in the name of scientific progress. We're building a community here for people who want to understand the real cost of human advancement, the dark stories behind the breakthroughs that shaped our world. So if you're ready to discover how the mother of modern physics became a victim of her own genius, subscribe now. This story will change how you think about scientific heroism forever. To understand Marie Curie's tragedy, you need to picture the world of the 1890s. Science was exploding with new discoveries every year. Wilhelm Röntgen had just discovered X-rays. Henri Becquerel had found that uranium emitted mysterious rays that could pass through solid objects. These invisible forces seemed magical, almost supernatural. Scientists called them Becquerel rays, and they represented a completely new form of energy that no one understood. The scientific community was convinced they had discovered something miraculous. These rays could make things glow in the dark, penetrate matter, and even treat diseases. What could be dangerous about something so wonderful? They had no idea they were handling one of the most lethal substances on Earth. No safety protocols, no protective equipment, no understanding of what radiation could do to living tissue over time. Marie Curie was about to walk directly into this invisible death trap, and her boundless curiosity would make her its most famous victim. Maria Skłodowska was born in Poland in 1867, a brilliant student trapped in a country that denied higher education to women. So she did what determined people do when faced with impossible barriers. She found another way. At 24, she moved to Paris with almost no money, enrolled at the Sorbonne, and lived in a freezing sixth-floor apartment where she sometimes fainted from hunger while studying. She graduated first in her physics degree and second in mathematics. That's where she met Pierre Curie, a French physicist 8 years her senior, who would become both her scientific partner and the love of her life. They married in 1895, and Marie had found not just a husband, but a collaborator who believed in her genius when the rest of the world saw only a foreign woman playing at science. In 1896, Marie decided to investigate those mysterious Becquerel rays for her doctoral thesis. She was drawn to uranium, the element that seemed to emit energy from nowhere. Using an electrometer invented by Pierre and his brother, she made a discovery that would change everything. The radiation wasn't coming from molecular interactions. It was coming from the atoms themselves. She had discovered that matter could literally transform itself, releasing energy in the process. She called this phenomenon radioactivity, and she had just opened the door to both the atomic age and her own destruction. Marie and Pierre didn't just study radioactivity, they lived with it. Their laboratory was a converted shed with a leaking roof, no ventilation, and holes in the floor. It was here that they would spend 4 backbreaking years processing tons of pitchblende, a uranium ore, to isolate tiny amounts of the radioactive elements they suspected were hidden inside. The work was literally crushing. Marie would stir huge vats of boiling ore with an iron rod nearly as tall as herself, grinding and dissolving tons of material to extract fractions of a gram of pure radium. Her hands became permanently stained and scarred from handling radioactive materials. But what made their work truly dangerous was their complete fascination with their discovery. Marie would carry test tubes of radium compounds in the pockets of her dress. She kept radioactive samples in her desk drawer at home because she loved watching them glow in the dark. Pierre would fall asleep with radium samples strapped to his arm to study how they affected human tissue. Marie described the beautiful green light that emanated from their laboratory at night, calling it fairy lights. They had no idea they were killing themselves with every experiment. No protective equipment, no ventilation, no understanding that the beautiful glow they admired was their death sentence. By 1902, they had isolated 1/10 of a gram of pure radium, and Marie had absorbed enough radiation to kill her several times over. When World War I erupted in 1914, Marie Curie did something extraordinary. With Pierre dead from a street accident in 1906, she was running the Radium Institute alone. Instead of continuing her research, she gathered her entire supply of radium, hid it in a bank vault, and decided to save lives. Marie realized that X-ray technology could help battlefield surgeons locate bullets and shrapnel in wounded soldiers, preventing unnecessary amputations. The problem was that X-ray equipment was stuck in distant hospitals while soldiers died at the front lines. So she created the first mobile X-ray units in history. She convinced wealthy friends to donate cars, persuaded manufacturers to provide equipment, and had local garages convert vehicles into mobile radiological labs. The French soldiers called them petites Curies, little Curies. But Marie didn't just organize this effort. She drove the vehicles herself. She learned automotive mechanics, mastered X-ray technology, and studied human anatomy. At age 47, she was driving to the front lines, setting up X-ray equipment under fire, and personally training other women to operate the machines. For 4 years, Marie worked around unshielded X-ray equipment for hours every day. She and her daughter Irene, who helped her throughout the war, treated over 1 million wounded soldiers. They saved countless lives and limbs. Marie gave up all her scientific research during this period, exposing herself to massive doses of radiation to serve her adopted country. The French government never formally recognized her wartime service, but the invisible damage was accumulating in her body with every X-ray she took. By the 1920s, the effects of 2 decades of radiation exposure were becoming impossible to ignore. Marie's vision was deteriorating rapidly. She developed double cataracts and underwent 4 operations to try to save her eyesight. Her fingers were severely burned and scarred from handling radioactive materials with her bare hands. The burns never healed properly, leaving her hands thick-skinned and painful. She began developing pernicious aplastic anemia, a condition where the bone marrow stops producing enough blood cells. She was constantly tired, pale, and weak. Yet she continued her research, driven by the same curiosity that had brought her to this point. In 1929, during her second trip to the United States, Marie gave what would be one of her final public speeches. Speaking to the American Society for the Control of Cancer, she warned about the perils in radium despite its use in cancer treatment. The irony was devastating. Here was the discoverer of radium, dying from radiation exposure, using her remaining strength to warn others about the dangers she had discovered too late. She knew exactly what was killing her, but there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. In early 1934, Marie made her final trip to Poland, the country she had never stopped loving despite decades in France. She was visibly ill, her face gaunt and grey, but she was determined to see the Warsaw Radium Institute that bore her name one last time. By spring, her condition had deteriorated rapidly. The aplastic anemia was destroying her body's ability to fight infection or heal from injury. Her bone marrow, bombarded by decades of radiation, had simply stopped functioning. She was taken to the Saint-Selemos sanatorium in the French Alps, where the clean mountain air was supposed to help her recovery. But Marie Curie was beyond recovery. Her daughter Eve described her as a ghostly shadow, lying motionless in bed. Even at the end, Marie's mind remained sharp and focused on science. Her last coherent words were typically precise. "Was it done with radium or with mesothorium?" she asked, stirring her tea with what her daughter described as a glass laboratory rod rather than a spoon. On July 4th, 1934, at the age of 66, Marie Curie died from aplastic anemia caused by radiation exposure. The woman who had unlocked the secrets of the atom had been destroyed by the very forces she discovered. Aplastic anemia is a cruel way to die. The radiation had gradually destroyed Marie's bone marrow, the soft tissue inside bones where blood cells are produced. Without functioning bone marrow, her body couldn't make enough red blood cells to carry oxygen, white blood cells to fight infection, or platelets to help blood clot. The radioactive elements Marie had absorbed over 4 decades, radium, polonium, and countless other isotopes, had settled in, her bones where they continued emitting radiation every second for the rest of her life. Each radioactive decay event damaged nearby cells, slowly destroying the very machinery her body needed to survive. What makes Marie's death particularly tragic is that she understood what was happening to her. By the 1920s, scientists were beginning to recognize the dangers of radiation exposure. The deaths of the radium girls, factory workers who painted watch dials with radioactive paint, had started to reveal the connection between radiation and bone diseases. Marie was among the first scientists to advocate for radiation safety measures. She had established protocols in her laboratory, recommended regular blood tests for researchers, and warned about the dangers of radium in untrained hands. But it was too late for her. Her body was so radioactive when she died that she had to be buried in a lead-lined coffin to protect others from contamination. When her remains were exhumed, in 1995, 61 years after her death, they were still emitting detectable levels of radiation. Marie Curie's tragedy occurred during what we now recognize as a period of dangerous scientific naivety. In the early 1900s, radioactive materials were not just considered safe. They were marketed as health products. Radium was added to everything from toothpaste to face cream to energy drinks. Companies claimed that radioactivity would boost energy, cure diseases, and restore youth. The more radioactive a product was, the more expensive and desirable it became. This wasn't malicious deception, it was genuine ignorance. The scientific community had no understanding of how radiation affected living tissue over time. The immediate effects were often positive. Small doses of radiation could treat certain cancers and skin conditions. What they didn't understand was the cumulative effect of chronic exposure. The damage radiation causes to DNA and cellular structures builds up over years and decades. By the time symptoms appear, the damage is usually irreversible and fatal. Marie Curie was both a victim and a pioneer of this era. Her research laid the foundation for nuclear medicine, radiation therapy, and our modern understanding of atomic structure. But she paid the ultimate price for knowledge that would benefit millions of future patients. Her death marked the end of the age of radioactive innocence and the beginning of our modern awareness of radiation dangers. Marie Curie's death sent shockwaves through the international scientific community. Here was the most famous scientist in the world, killed by her own discoveries. Her death became a rallying cry for radiation safety and medical research ethics. The immediate impact was the development of comprehensive radiation protection standards. Laboratories worldwide implemented safety protocols, protective equipment, and exposure limits that are still used today. Marie's death quite literally saved the lives of countless future researchers. Her scientific legacy lives on in ways she could never have imagined. The Curie Institutes in Paris and Warsaw remain leading cancer research centers. The techniques she developed for isolating radioactive isotopes became the foundation of nuclear medicine. Millions of cancer patients have been treated using radiation therapy that evolved from her discoveries. But perhaps most remarkably, Marie Curie remains radioactive even in death. Her laboratory notebooks, her clothes, even her cookbook are stored in lead-lined boxes at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. They will remain dangerous for another 1,500 years. Anyone who wants to examine these materials must sign a liability waiver and wear protective equipment. In a very real sense, Marie Curie's radioactive legacy is literally untouchable. She was the first woman to be entombed in the Pantheon in Paris based on her own achievements rather than her husband's. She lies there still, in her lead-lined coffin, a testament to both the power of human curiosity and its potential cost. Marie Curie's story raises profound questions about the price of scientific progress. She knew she was dying from radiation exposure, yet she continued her research until the end. Was this dedication or obsession? Heroism or tragedy? The truth is, probably both. Marie Curie embodied the paradox of scientific discovery. The same curiosity that drives breakthrough discoveries can blind us to their dangers. She was simultaneously a victim of her ignorance and a hero of human knowledge. Her story reminds us that every major scientific advance comes with hidden costs. The scientists who first split the atom created both nuclear medicine and nuclear weapons. The researchers who developed plastics gave us modern convenience and environmental catastrophe. Today, we're facing similar questions about artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and nanotechnology. What are the hidden dangers of the technologies we're developing right now? What prices will future generations pay for our current scientific achievements? Marie Curie's legacy isn't just about radioactivity. It's about the responsibility that comes with scientific power. She died so that we could understand the dangers of the forces she unleashed. The question is whether we're wise enough to learn from her sacrifice. So here's what I want you to think about. What scientific breakthroughs happening today might have hidden dangers we don't yet understand? What technologies are we embracing without fully comprehending their long-term consequences? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Some of the most insightful discussions happen right here, and your perspectives often inspire future episodes. If stories like this fascinate you, if you want to understand the real human cost of scientific progress, make sure you're subscribed. This channel exists for people who appreciate the complex, often dark, reality behind the discoveries that shaped our world. Thanks for watching, and remember, the greatest scientific minds in history were often their own first victims. Marie Curie's sacrifice gave us the knowledge to protect ourselves. The question is whether we're smart enough to use it.